This character hardly even needs an introduction. Awakener, or how Global refers to her, the Awakened One. Another highly anticipated character, while also being a faction buffer for the Time Heroes. She's really flexible, meaning that she fits just about anywhere, especially if you get her 3C, so that she buffs herself up. Though I feel like for newer players, she's kind of fine without it. She'll still hit very hard. But let's move on ahead so that I can tell you more about her. So her talent, her damage though increases as well as her range, and the range is increased by 2 at 5 and 6 stars, but only increases by 1 at 3 and 4 stars. After she takes action, she applies Spellbound to 2 selected enemies, and what it does is that it reduces their healing effect by 30%, and when moving further than 2 blocks, they will consume 1 additional mobility. It cannot be dispelled, and you can use it again after every 3 turns. When she dies, she places a dimensional gate where she died at, which becomes a terrain effect. And then at the start of the next turn, she summons a doppelganger of herself. So in other words, she basically revives. So this doppelganger has 30% less stats and will vanish after 3 turns. But if you do get a kill with this doppelganger, you recover all of your HP and regain all of your stats again, which can only trigger once every battle. She is yet again another character who wants to be at least at 5 stars to reach their maximum potential. You hate to see it, you really do. Otherwise, she'll be able to slow down specific targets, and this thing cannot be avoided unless Rezencio's talent or anything that lets them be immune to all debuffs. The way how she revives is very unique, though technically it's not her reviving but a doppelganger of herself. It's pretty ridiculous seeing how we have so many characters who can revive, though there are some characters who can counter it. But that logic should not affect Awakener. So to balance that out, they reduced her stats and made her clone last for 3 turns. And if you don't get a kill by then she dies forever. For her class mastery stones, for all of them you want HP, int, and defense. However, the weapon can be different. You can put skill instead if you feel like it. Then for the arena stones, you want a defensive set like mine. Or if you only care about damage, then knock yourself out by going with a offensive set. The best soldiers for her to use are of course the sorcerers, mainly for PvE rather than PvP now, because they do have that huge HP threshold where they need to be at 100% HP for them to do lots of damage. The poison bat mage can work in about anywhere for single targeted purposes, because them applying a debuff before battle can be huge. The deck gunner, but only on specific maps with lots of terrain. Then you have the glacial elemental. Newer players, I wouldn't really focus on these guys too much, but the reason why I say these guys, because there are going to be maps with water terrains. So with these guys, she shouldn't have any problems with that. Then lastly, the Crystal's Warlock. Great to focus more on surviving since they are really tanky and they have self-healing, which is really nice if going all AoE. For her weapons, she has 3 best in slots, one of them being the Scepter, if you're mainly going single target with her. Second option, which is my personal recommendation, the Miracle Staff, so that she does more damage with her AoEs. The third best in slot is the Night Bloom. I know what I said, it's crazy, but hear me out. It's mainly an option that you can go with for situational purposes, so that she can provide more support for her teammates. It not only affects her 1C skill and her teleport to dispel stuff, but her faction buff takes in the effect from this weapon. Not a lot of people run it, but it's there for that kind of reason. But if you don't have any of those 3 that I mentioned, then the Red Moon should be good enough. However, if you don't really care about PvP, but are more focused on PvE related content, I would just recommend going with the Scepter for more range, or simply the Red Moon for stats. The armor, of course, the Tenyo robe. The Galaxy cloak is fine for now until you get the Tenyos. For the helmet that you want on her, Tenyo's headaddress or the electric headwear. This one really becomes a huge staple in the PvP scene, mainly because of Awakener, since she can swap herself in the opponent's position. And if you're thinking about the glory headwear, I really don't recommend it since her best soldiers are mages, and typically Awakener is seen as a mage since demons are very fragile against holy units, and they don't do a whole lot against them too. But that would only mean that she won't benefit from the healing, since you have to be in mixed forces for that, but should benefit from the revive if she gets killed by fixed damage. Then for the accessory, I would only use the drop near in PvP for counter killing, especially with how many range attackers there are. Dimensional Jewel is not bad as a mini clock, Star Earring to survive against assassins like Lostam. As for enchants, Breeze is really going to be a nice one so that you have some extra space to move in and potentially swap places with the enemy. Magic for more damage. Clock isn't a bad choice to use, especially with how high of a cooldown her other AoEs are. I've seen Full Moon on her. I'm pretty sure it's mainly because of the 30% stat loss when she revives. Full Moon only gives a 10% increase to all your stats as long as your HP is above 80%. In my opinion, I don't see a whole lot of gain from that. Mainly for other characters, I see that working, but hey, that's just how I feel. If you want to use it for that exact reason, then go ahead. It's not like I'm saying that it's bad or anything like that. Alright, so with all of that, hopefully that helped if you guys were wondering how to build Awakener. So let's go ahead and walk through the first Awakening stage. Alright, for this stage, we're going to be up against Matthew, Grenchill, and then the Iron Blood Commander. So these are the skills that I'm going to be rocking with. I'm going to be using her swap skill and 2 single target ones. You can use AoEs for chip damage. That can work if you can't one-shot them. The soldier that I'm going to be using is the Poison Bat Mage because he can apply 1 random debuff before battle. Sorcerers aren't bad as well. In the deck Gunner, I would honestly really recommend these guys because you can literally stand on the defensive tile on the left or right and then have them come to you and then attack them on that tile because you get that defense ignore and you're going to be hitting a lot. So yeah, that is one way that you can cheese this. Another way that you can cheese this is by using her swap skill, but I'm not really going to do that. So overall, in this whole battle, I don't think it's going to be that hard at all. Unless your Awakener is like really weak, you should be able to outrange them. Especially if you get those deck gunners upgraded, you'll definitely have that class advantage against Matthew and Grenchill because those archers will do a lot against those flyers. And then if you use Fireball, that move should be really effective against, well, all 3 of these guys since they're all infantry. And when I mentioned that you can cheese this using her swap skill, I really mean that you can. You should be able to. If you're mainly having trouble with Matthew, then you can do that. Just go on the defensive tile and then swap places with Matthew, and then Matthew should have a hard time moving out of that, and then you should be able to freely hit him. Grenchill is the one that will really watch out the most, so hopefully you're strong enough to really take her out. Though I don't think it should be that much of an issue because if you do enough damage and if she one-shots you, you can revive and then kill her. And Iron Blood Commander, she's not threatening at all. For some reason, her stats are really low. I don't know what's up with that. She can still hit hard either way, so just make sure you stay out of her range, then most likely, you should be able to one-shot her. Now on to her 3C. It has a 4-turn cooldown. It reaches 3 blocks away and 3 blocks around. The passive on this thing will let her faction buff for Heroes of Time units after she takes action or whenever that she uses the skill, with a special effect of dealing 8% increased damage, but it increases 8% more when fighting against enemies with Spellbound. Upon using this, she summons 6 spell bombs to attack random enemies within range. It doesn't really do a whole lot, but each time that it hits the same enemy, it does 10% more damage each time. It applies 2 random debuffs, and when only 1 enemy is hit, the cooldown of the skill is reduced by 3 turns. If the enemy has no soldiers, damage dealt on this is increased by 300%, and if it kills the enemy, her talent cooldown is refreshed. I find it crazy that she's a time faction buffer. It's really good. 8% damage increase in general for just having it is kind of a huge deal. This skill really tempts you to really mainly target one enemy, but that's how you should really be using the skill because most of the time it one-shots. And maybe even in a group of 2 enemies, but maybe if you get lucky, but I don't really see that. I would say that you're going to be putting them in the red zone, but in a group of 3 more enemies, the skill is pretty much useless. If anything, you're going to be doing that to apply the debuff and reapply the faction buff. But that 300 damage boost is going to be really incredible for stuff like Ancient Beckoning. So yeah, if you really look at it, this skill is really nasty, considering that she has a 1C skill that can more than likely put them in a situation where they're by themselves. Alright, so if you guys are curious, this is her 3C animation right here. Yup, it's been a while, but just like Wetham, an actual animation of her using a 3C. But the animation is sick, especially when it hits the enemy. It's really satisfying to look at that. For new people watching this, typically with how these second awakening stages work, I usually don't show them unless they're very difficult, because you do get 3 other characters that you can use and they should be good enough to carry you, even if your character isn't doing anything. So yeah, this one isn't really all that bad. Just stay out of their range and let them come to you, and then on the next turn, just wreck them with a bunch of AoEs. That's really all there is to it for this one. But yeah, with that being said, I'll see you guys for the showcase. Alright, so whenever you end your turn with Awakener, you'll be able to apply 2 debuffs that are called Spellbound. You can apply it on 2 different enemies, and then that should reduce the healing effects on both sides, so... And there it goes, the faction buff right there. And if we take a look at her talent debuff, you can see what it does. So to really understand the mobility thing, so this Labatine has a total of 3 mobility, but because of the debuff, it can only really move 2 blocks. And then if we take a look at the Cavalry, they usually have a movement of 5 in total, but with Awakener's talent debuff, they can only really move up to 3 blocks. Because someone with 3 mobility gets to only move 2 blocks, and then someone with 5 mobility, well, it reduces it by 2. So if we take into account to their mobility being increased, so if we do the math right, if their total mobility is increased by 3, but with the debuff only lets them move 2 blocks, and then someone with 5 mobility reduces it to 3. So what does 7 tell us? It should be 4 blocks. You can see in total, 1, 2, 3, 4. It even affects enemies with Act Again skills. So this Hellhound did use Strike, which lets you move 3 blocks afterwards, but you can see right here that he can only really move 2 blocks. So yeah, that's really something. And then with someone who has even mobility like Lestelle, so if we go ahead and try to put the debuff on her, she can move 3 blocks. Just like how it would be if the enemy has 5 mobility. And if you guys are still confused, that is because Lestelle is not moving more than 4 blocks. It did get reduced by 1 because she's moving more than 2 blocks. But since that she's not moving more than 4 blocks, it didn't get reduced. Just think of it like this. If they're moving an odd amount of times, their mobility is reduced. So if it's 3 mobility, it gets reduced by 1, since they're moving more than 2 blocks. If the total mobility is 5, then it's reduced by 3, since they're moving more than 4 blocks. And at 7, it's reduced to 4. So the math comes down to this. Starting off at 3 mobility, it's lowered by 1, which equals to 2 because of the debuff. Always add 2 to their actual mobility, and keep on adding 1 for each time that they do move more than 2 blocks, because their movement will be lowered. So if the opponent with 3 mobility gains Breeze plus 2 mobility for a total of 5, by going with our math, if the talent debuff causes the total movement of 3 to reduce it to 2, so 3 minus 1, then with 5, since they are moving more than 2 blocks twice, you would do 5 minus 2, which leads up to 3 actual blocks that they can move. Then at 7 mobility, 5 plus 2, which equals to 7, as their total mobility, and then you do 2 plus 1, with the 2 coming from how much is being reduced from 5 mobility. Since with them having 7 mobility, they are moving more than 2 blocks 3 times. So you do 2 plus 1, and then you get 7 minus 3, which equals to them actually moving 4 blocks with the Awakener's talent debuff. Oh, and with even mobility, so anything 1 below that odd number will still have the same total amount, so 6 to 7 initial mobility is still 4, and 4 to 5 mobility is still 3. Then if we take it a step further, into 11 mobility, so far from what we know, if 6 to 7 initial mobility gets reduced to 4, just add 2, and we're just going to be using the odd number because it's more easier to understand it. So 7 plus 2, which equals 9 to the total mobility, and 3 plus 1 equals 4 to how much is being reduced, you get 5 total. With 10 to 11 mobility, we're just going to be using the 11, so just using the odd number from where we left off. 9 plus 2, which gives 11, and then 4 plus 1, which equals 5 to how much is being reduced. Lastly, we do 11 minus 5, which gives us 6 total mobility, if they have Awakener's talent debuff. And just remember, the number below that odd number will still retain the same amount of mobility as that odd number. And then if we come back and look at our 3C, for what it's doing, it is extremely powerful and consistent. And by taking a look at the description, it's really telling you that, hey, if you're using this on one enemy, you're really going to be getting the full benefit of this. And that's how you're mainly going to be using this 3C. And I really like the animation. So if you go ahead and use it right here, boom, 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 boom. You can see that the damage did get increased every time. And if you get a kill with it, you get to apply her talent buff again. But don't worry, even if you don't use it, on the next turn you should be able to still use it. The cooldown still doesn't take into effect yet. And remember that every time you do use a 3C, you are reapplying the faction buff. And by hitting only one enemy, the cooldown is reduced by 3, so leaving you with the next turn to use it again. And so with the 1C, you can really make some interesting plays with this. So if you do use this skill on an ally, you get to apply 2 buffs on them while swapping places with them. But if it's an enemy, you can only swap places with them if they have Spellbound, and also gives them 2 debuffs instead. And then afterwards, after using this, you get to move 2 blocks to attack. So the thing about her 3C is that it's really only good on one enemy, but really horrible if they are grouped up. So if we take a look, this 3C is not going to be doing a whole lot because it's going to be hitting 2 enemies at once. Yeah, it'll do a lot, but you aren't guaranteed a kill from this. And you really want to use this on one enemy every time to get the full benefit. But with this skill, you can kidnap them, reposition them, and then now they are vulnerable to her 3C. They're applied with some debuffs, some strong debuffs at that. But with someone like Hilda around, Hilda allows it so that any one of her teammates cannot be displaced. And what does her 1C do? Well, it displaces. So even if I wanted to, I can't swap places with Sophia right here. And that's going to be the same thing against the opponents. So if they have a Hilda on the team, you're not going to be able to swap places. But you still can use this even if they don't have Spellbound. The only thing though is that you're only going to be giving them the debuff and you're not going to be swapping places. So it's just a good at the gun skill in general. And then as for a last unique skill, it's a single target that does more damage against enemies who have Spellbound, and you are able to heal and teleport 2 blocks after battle. A really reliable single target skill to have. And something else that I want to point out about her 3C is the 300 damage boost if the enemy does not have any soldier. From what I found, you're only really getting that if the enemy has no soldiers to begin with. Like for example the dragon, they're just one single unit, no soldiers or anything like that. If we go ahead and use a 3C right here, it should be doing a ton of damage. 9,000 up to 13,000, but 15,000 with crit. So it went from 100% to 61%. And so against someone like Valen, his magic defense is about the same as the Fire Dragon, but since that he actually does have soldiers, which were wiped out by Elaine, you can see that there is a massive difference between the Anarchy and the Dragon. And the thing about her revive, when she does so, it's technically not a revive but rather a clone, from what it says. So currently, 2 out of 3 skills are on cooldown. So once she does die, she will place a portal, which is a terrain effect. And so then on the next turn, she comes in. It refreshes your skill, and you can see this right here, and what it tells you is that her stats are reduced by 30%, but it gets removed after killing an enemy. And for some reason, it doesn't tell you that it kills you after 3 turns. I feel like they should, even though it tells you on her talent. And so if you do get a kill with this, you do get to fully revive yourself, pretty much. So once you get a kill, the debuff that was on her is no longer gone but changed. But on the last turn, if you don't end up getting a kill with Awakener, then she dies. Her time is up. Overall, Awakener has really great fundamentals. She can make some cheeky plays by repositioning herself and her teammates, or swap herself with the opponents to where they're by themselves and Awakener can use her 3C to potentially one-shot them. It is a displacement effect though, so Hilda and anybody with the electric headward buff can prevent that, and we'll more than likely see that happening. And in order to reapply the faction buff again, all she has to do is use it. Very simple. This skill really sucks in general in a group of enemies, but most of the time it will kill if the enemy are by themselves, unless they are like somewhat really tanky. While it does offer some great additional effects like reducing its cooldown, sometimes it can be a bit inconsistent, mainly if they like to stick together and especially if they have Hilda. Then her 3C really becomes hard to take advantage of. The 300 damage increase really only takes effect against bosses, since they usually have no soldiers. The damage boost won't work against someone like Anarchy who have soldiers, even if you do wipe them out, but against something like the dragons, you'll get that effect. And trust me, I did a bunch of testing with it, and that seemed to be like the only case. So it's really great, especially in Ancient Beckoning. Just something to note. Even if she does revive, her lack of DPS isn't all too terrible. She'll still hit somewhat hard, even managing to one-shot stuff with her 3C, maybe out of 7 out of 10 times, maybe 8 at worst. So once that happens, you and the opponent are going to be really desperate for a kill. In most content, you won't necessarily have to put a lot of effort into really using her, but in PvP, you're going to be making the most out of her technicality-wise. So basically what I'm saying is that her mechanical skills are what really brings her at the top level, besides just doing lots of damage with incredible range. And not only just those, but she's also really versatile. So there we go, that was Awakener's showcase. A very powerful character to have, though I feel like for beginners and those who enjoy PvE the most, you can honestly skip it if you want to. She'll feel like any magic damage dealer, with the exception of allowing better positioning and is pretty self-sufficient. In PvP, you'll make better use of her technical playstyle. so it's a lot more strategic over there. Still, not a very bad character to get and use, since she can be used anywhere. The only thing that really sucks though is that she wants to be at 5 stars in order to maximize her range. But that's all I got for you guys. Feel free to leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more, and let me know down in the comments what you guys think about Awakener. And yeah, thanks for watching. Your fellow Z.